is in the building. Facto.
Welcome to Ignorance is Contagious, a podcast about stories and the lessons you learn from them. I'm James LeGrand.
And I'm Abdul Majid.
In today's episode, we're discussing the war in Sudan. After a year of warring, the crisis in the Sudan has only worsened. With 16,000 fatalities since the start of the war, the power struggles between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. So we ask the question, does absolute power corrupt absolutely? With us, as always, is the lover of all things funny, Kristen J. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So the reason I wanted to talk about this specifically is because, as I said multiple times on this podcast, I'm a Muslim. Ramadan ended, and this particular war started during Ramadan last year, and it's continuing during Ramadan this year. And I thought it was interesting that it hasn't got the traction that I thought it would have. And the reasons behind the warring I thought were interesting, which we'll get into when we go through the article. So with that being said, Kristen J., take it away.
Sudan on brink of collapse and starvation as country marks 1 year of civil war. This article is written by Stephanie Busari, Eve Brennan, Sarah Dean, and Jennifer Hansler, CNN. As Sudan marks the grim anniversary of a year-long conflict, aid agencies have warned that the country teeters on the edge of collapse, facing an unprecedented humanitarian crisis that has been largely ignored by the rest of the world. Islamic Relief, a humanitarian and development agency, painted a stark picture of Sudan's situation, warning that it is on the brink of mass famine, with young children facing the prospect of starving to death. The situation in Sudan is dire, with over 8.4 million people, including 2 million children under the age of 5, forced to flee their homes in the wake of the conflict, according to Doctors Without Borders. Despite these alarming figures, the international response has been woefully inadequate, with only 5% of the 2024 humanitarian response plan for Sudan funded thus far, Islamic Relief said in a statement. The agency's country director for Sudan, El Sadiq El Noor, said, "Over the past year, I've seen my country descend into violence, madness, and destruction, neglected by the rest of the world." The conflict, which has pitted the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, against the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces, RSF, has left millions displaced and countless civilians dead or severely injured. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk warned in a statement Monday of a further escalation in violence in Sudan as parties to the conflict armed civilians and more armed groups join the fighting. Since the start of the civil war, thousands of homes, schools, hospitals, and other vital civilian structures have been destroyed, plunging the country into a severe humanitarian crisis and creating the world's largest displacement crisis, his office said. Nearly 18 million people face acute food insecurity, 14 million of them children, and over 70% of hospitals are no longer functional amid a rise in infectious diseases, Turk added. On Monday, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned crimes against humanity were potentially being committed in the country, adding that recent reports of escalating hostilities in El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur, were a fresh cause for deep alarm. Over the weekend, RSF-affiliated militias attacked and burned villages west of El Fasher, leading to widespread new displacement, Guterres said. Fighting continued Monday on the outskirts of El Fasher, he added. "Let me be clear, any attack on El Fasher would be devastating for civilians and could lead to full-blown intercommunal conflict across Darfur," Guterres warned.
I guess I'll start with James with my first question. Before reading this article, have you heard, read, or have been following this particular war? And if so, why? And if so, why not?
Yeah, I was aware of the war. I completely believe that it's purposely not being brought to the forefront in the media, right? Which is interesting. You know, we bring up Ukraine and Russia all the time. You hear that daily on the newscast, but you don't hear about this daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, right? So I've heard of it. I do follow it, but mostly from a resources perspective, meaning where I hear about it is because I'm an investor, and this topic usually comes up from the perspective of precious metals investors because of gold. So that's where I tend to get that news. But other than that, I do not hear it being pushed to me from the major media.
Same question, Kristen. Have you been following this at all?
I heard of it. I have not been following it. Just aware, but I didn't follow it. I think my immediate response was, yep, when it's a certain group, we just don't hear about that. And I keep my TV and my radio locked on MSNBC. So this is not the first time, and it won't be the last time that when it's certain countries, it just doesn't get the attention that it needs or the support. And I'm still trying to figure out why we are so Team Israel. I mean, the way Biden jumped on that has me like, is there some more agreements that we're just not aware of? Like, it was just too quick. I know that's a whole different issue, but I just don't ever hear about America supporting certain countries that have devastating things going on. It's not new.
And perhaps that's a good podcast topic for another day.
Which part? Why? How come we didn't hear about this?
No, is Israel and Ukraine.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry, Israel. Excuse me, Israel and Palestine.
In Gaza, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
I believe one of the major reasons why we support Israel so much is because of AIPAC and because of the connection between the American Israelis here and the Israelis that go over there. There are more Jews in America than there are actually in Israel. And they tend to send money back and fund their causes for a whole host of reasons, a lot of them being religious reasons, a lot of them being cultural reasons, race reasons, what have you. But we can go down that rabbit hole in another conversation.
One more topic on that. One more point on that. Don't forget the strategic location of Israel as well. Yeah. So if we have problems with anybody in that neighborhood, we know we can land in Israel and stage our weapons and support and all those things. Just again, just another important point.
Yeah, and just to put a button on that, I do think that we do have proxies everywhere we go. That's the reason we got Hawaii to watch over Asia and Japan. The reason, so they became our proxy. Alaska, the whole host of other places. That's matter of fact, that's the UN, but they became our proxies. But unlike these other places, they got so much power that they reversed it. It's like a Uno card. They reversed it on us. So we had power over them for so long that we gave them so much. Yeah, it's like we gave them so much, and they raised their level of in our society in America, that we started giving this back to their politicians, that they just reversed it on us. So we had power over them, and now they have financial power over us, and a bunch of other things. So
you saying they hit us with a reverse and then a draw four?
Yeah, hit reverse and a draw four, and keep giving me money and look the other way. Yeah, skip.
Draw two, draw four.
Yeah.
Uno,
so to answer the question myself, I've been watching this for a while. I do watch a lot of international news. So I've been watching this for a while, because this isn't the first Sudanese uprising. I believe in the history of Sudan, they've had like 15 military coups. What's happening in Darfur has been going on for a while. What's happening in Khartoum has been going on for a while. And like James said, from a resources standpoint, I've been noticing a lot of interest in other places. And there is that old adage, when it's blood on the field, buy land.
When it's blood in the streets, buy real estate.
Buy real estate, yeah. So I do believe that's a part of it, but we'll get to that in some later questions I have. But personally, I have been watching it. So let me start with Kristen. Why do you think Israel and Ukraine has gotten more attention than what's happening in Sudan, even though we need Africa's resources more than we need the resources in Ukraine and Sudan? I mean, and Israel.
I don't even know how to begin to explain it, but I mean, there's some dots that definitely are connected that I'm just not fully aware of. You know how you hear something, you're like, there's more to this story that you're not telling us. I don't think it's just as simple as let's make sure Ukraine wins because we don't want Putin to have power. I think that might be a part of it, but I think that there's just more elements to that. So I don't know. And then when I hear things like I remember one news reported that Putin had definitely committed crimes against humanity. So I'm like, okay, so if he committed a crime, we can't just like somebody can't just hold him accountable for that, or we just have to. This war is so expensive, and it. I'm like, can somebody please go ahead on and eliminate my son's student loan? Can we do that before you go sending more money? I mean, I think it's nice that we want to help our allies out, but I'm not fully a Republican with this, but I do kind of feel a little bit like you're not taking care of home, Unc. You know, make sure home is good. Home is not good. Home is not bad, but home is not good. And I mean, they're just doling it out, looking out. And it probably would have been cheaper to just send some little whore over and take Putin out.
So, and a lot of it comes back to the proxy wars that we talked about before. If we can keep Ukraine, if we can keep the Ukraine and Russia war going over there, then we don't have an issue with Russia coming here. So we support Ukraine. So Russia expends all of its resources. It continues to be minimized because they're spending all their money. They're going through all their materials. That means they're less in a position to attack the U.S. or its interests. So from a Russia Ukraine perspective, it's complete proxy, right? That's where that is. Similarly, Israel and anyone else, right? Again, it's part of it is proxy, part of it is strategic significance, and part of it is within Israel. There are people there who are here in the United States that are in significant places of power that can push their angle as well. So it's a little different there. Again, Israel is strategically located in the middle of what's been declared a bad neighborhood. So what the U.S. needs to go in, and again, we want to keep the fighting there. We don't want the fighting to come to the U.S., right? So if we can go there and keep the fighting taking place there, it doesn't come here, right? So strategically located, an ally for that reason. Also a nuclear power, right? So and there's a whole part of this around nuclear weapons also, right? So if Israel and Iran, for example, can fight each other, and we can get continue to diminish their abilities and diminish their ability to enhance their nuclear weapons, they don't have weapons that can reach us here. So I do see a strong tendency towards trying to keep the fighting there, and then we support whoever we support. And it's like, okay, as long as you keep the fighting there, we'll send you the money, we'll send you the resources, just don't bring it here. So there is a wider context here that I think sometimes we just forget about, which is if we don't support Ukraine and Russia has the ability to take over Ukraine, then Russia is number one emboldened, number two has more resources, number three has land that's closer to our other allies, which means number four, they can strike more of our interests and hurt us and pull us actually from supporting a war to actually being in it.
Yeah, I think one of the major reasons that the coverage disparity is really all the oil in South Sudan. I think, like everything that you said, I think this is an economic war. Like we've said multiple times, this is very much a proxy war. Um, here's a list of the military suppliers, the people who are providing the weapons for the Sudanese government. This is the list of the people providing the weapons: Belarus, China, Cuba, Czech Republic, Iran, North Korea, Poland, Russia, Turkey, Ukraine, Vietnam. A lot of these factions are or factions that fight one another, who are in no way, shape, or form. Um, for example, the Ukraine and Russia, they're enemies. All the other forces that are here are communist forces. So I think this idea that communists might take over, the Russians might take over, the Chinese might take over. China is like one of the number one suppliers for Sudan in terms of resources. Matter of fact, China is one of the number one suppliers for all of Africa at this point.
Correct.
And that's a whole nother that's a whole nother concern I have with regards to what's going on in Sudan or what's going on in Africa. The people who the ones, they're pretty much taking the money that we give them from our technology, from for all the manufacturing stuff that we do for them, and they're buying up everything. So because China essentially doesn't produce anything, they reproduce. The technology that they get comes from here, they pirate it, and then they go over and make their version of it. They do the same thing with the German cars. They do the same thing they do a lot of reproducing, and their manufacturing plants do a lot of reproducing. That's how they got so much money. And the numbers, just the numbers alone, and how they control their population. My fear is that they're going to take that idea and bring it over to Africa and do what they're doing now in the Congo, taking over certain regions, not allowing people to intermingle. They have their own community in the Congo, and they allowed the Congolese government allowed them to put their products into the market, which then pushes out the African products because they can do it at a cheaper price. So I just think I think this with regards to Africa, whether it's the Congo, with regards to Sudan, whether it's regards to things going on in South Africa, things going on in Kenya. I think this is all a resource. People look at Africa like a gold mine.
It's a gold mine, yeah.
It is. It's literally a gold. It's the Wild
literally,
West.
it literally is.
Stepped in and taken over. It's very, very parasite-like. I have a quick question though, Slappy. Was that the question that you asked me initially?
No, I spun off into something else. The question I asked you why I thought there's disparity in the two, and I think the reason why they're not covering the Sudanese war is because they're trying to hide the fact that this resource grab is going on, and they rather have the misdirection. Look at what's going on in Ukraine, which has nothing to do with us, so we don't have to show that we're not losing lives. For the most part, we're probably losing some money that we can complain about, but it's not as bad as what's happening in the Sudan. Because if we focus on what's going on in the Sudan, the questions start arising the same way the questions are arising with Gaza. It's why are we over there? What are we doing over there? How much money are we spending over there? What are we getting for our money over there? Are we going to start putting troops on the ground over there? Like all these questions start to arise with regards to our interests over there. And you have so many companies and so many politicians who just don't want to look over there because what the resources that they're stealing over there would shadow everything that's happening in Gaza and in Ukraine, specifically the number of deaths. When you start looking at the numbers, 16,000 deaths in a year.
It's probably higher.
Probably higher. And then 8.5 displaced Sudanese people.
Mm-hmm.
Then we start looking, okay, what is our participation? Why aren't we? It's like all these questions start to arise as to what are we doing with Sudan and why aren't we doing anything with Sudan? And then we got to start looking into who owns what, who has stock in what company, who's benefiting financially from these things. And you start to go down a rabbit hole. A lot of these American politicians and a lot of these American business owners don't want to, because people forget that we're the number one arms dealer. So even though it's Turkey selling them guns and Iran selling them guns, it's our stuff that we're putting into the market that gets over there.
What's the brand that we have? What's the American weaponry brand?
Oh, it's the military industrial complex. There's a bunch of different brands in terms of like the ones who make the tanks, the ones who makes the planes, the one who just makes. We make all guns, Smith and Wesson, and
the ammunition,
ammunition, and fighter planes, and aircraft carriers, and rocket launchers. Like all that stuff is our stuff. Yeah. And we're not only we're the number one supplier, we're the number one black marketer. So
Yeah, I'd make 2 points on why at least I think Sudan isn't being covered more, and one of them I already made, right? That I think there's a strategic conversation around containing Russia through proxies and containing the Middle East through proxies. So that's why I would spend some time on that one. There's a more controversial one though that I'm going to mention now. So, and this gets racial, right? That when you think about where the power center is in America, if that power center does not lie with Black people, right? I don't think I'm saying anything controversial there, right? But if you are a white person watching other white people at war and you're seeing white people being killed, you have an interest in watching more because they look like you. You can envision yourself being in that situation. Now you look at the Sudan, and you see people that don't look like you. You see people that are having a civil war, and then you can apply to that. Well, those people, tearing each other apart doesn't affect U.S. Because unfortunately, people are short-sighted and don't understand the resources conversation that Abdul mentioned, right? That there's a big resource thing taking place. So I think some of this also is just people not recognizing themselves in the story. They don't see themselves in that story. They do see themselves in Ukraine. They do see themselves in Israel.
yes, I think for the American population, when you view it from a white lens and you see these blue-eyed babies with dirt on their faces, looking disheveled, it hits at the heartstrings of us more than some dark-skinned Sudanese kid whose malnutrition flies around him because he hadn't eaten in 4 months. We spoke about all these other governments and international interests that look at Sudan as a resource. So when it comes to solving Sudan's or Africa's problem, should Africans deal with African problems without the interference from the West, or do they need our interference?
I tend to look at things through a more holistic perspective. I think we've mentioned that before, right? I think anything we can do, we meaning any country, any nation, any person can do to help stop hostilities and save lives, we should do. So I know that we tend to um, really, I guess, prioritize borders over everything else. And I'm not saying do away with borders. I do see a need for countries to have set borders and all those things. This is not a protectionist conversation. It's more of how do we stop hostilities? How do we save lives? How do we make sure that people can live a healthy, happy, fruitful, and productive life where they're leaving something behind and while living a full lifetime, right? That's what I look at. So specifically looking at the Sudan, yeah, we should be there. We should be at the negotiation table. We should be helping these warring factions to figure out where their commonalities are and to stop the power struggles. We should be helping them to figure out if I'm not saying that in any way am I saying that that our model of governance is the best of the best of the best. I think it's the best for what we have right now. But is it perfect? Nope, it's not perfect, but better than what they have right now. So perhaps we need to be at the table discussing how can we help these folks get closer to democracy to end some of the corruption, end some of the authoritarianism that's taking place there. But for me, I think the priority is save lives, stop the killing, and we should do anything in our power to help with that story.
I think that Africa at this moment has a whole lot of interference from some of everybody under the guise of help. And people are just plucking away and pulling away and just breaking Africa all up. And I think that they realize that they need to now stand on their own from some of the things that I've seen, random clips and information. I would like to see Africa stand on its own. And but as a whole, I don't know if I'm just a dreamer with that part, but I would really love to see Africa just go ahead on and stand up and be the motherland that it is. Because everybody's going to want something. Everybody that's like, I'll help you, but I'm gonna need, I know y'all
It's a
got,
fair point.
I
It's a
get
fair
some,
point.
and they already have so many other places China has really done them dirty. China has really done them dirty. I mean, like China has set up certain loans or whatever where it's destined for them to default. And once they default, China then takes ownership of it. So I mean, and it's just literally like a parasite, literally like that movie Parasite. The China really is acting like that in Africa. And you saw
Yeah.
the airport. You went to South Africa. You saw the airport, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was the Johannesburg airport. Which airport was it that has like all the Asian decor?
It might be Johannesburg because I didn't see it in Cape Town. I was in Cape Town.
Okay, because the Johannesburg Jayburg airport does not look like you're in Africa. I was like, what?
Yeah, the thing that America has shown, not even America, let's call it the West, and let's call it, and a lot of other countries, China being one of them, is that there's nothing for free. And they all have a history of indentured servitude within their own culture. And they will export that indentured servitude onto other people, specifically the African people. So if you become beholden to these people, these countries, now I don't say people like some sort of races, but beholden to these different countries and governments and political bodies, they will hold you under their thumb as long as they can and bleed the resources out of you.
Generational, right? They do that with generation.
Generation. It's been a problem for Haiti. I know we're talking about Africa, but if you look around the country, once you're under the thumb of one of these major dominated countries,
Mhm.
they behold you. So uh so for me, I would love to see Africa take care of African business on its own, like legitimize their African Union. I really wish they would put their resources or turn their money into gold, like the way we used to have it, have our money backed by gold. Because they could do it, and if they did that, most of these countries would have a really really bad problem. I remember in Libya, the story behind
Mm-hmm.
Libya was that Gaddafi was
Mm-hmm.
well, he nationalized the oil, which was one thing, and then he was going to make their money back by gold and take us off the American standard. And then all of a sudden, a coup happens, and he's hung in the street. So
A gold back dinar. Yep,
a
I
gold
remember
back
that. That
dinar,
was
a gold
yep.
back anything would be, especially there where they have all of the resources. It's literally like Wakanda. They have
Mhm.
it all.
But
But
to your
these,
point on that, there
uh-huh.
is a country who has done something. They've already dipped their toe into the pool, and no one can mess with them. And it's China.
China, yeah.
China, China basically said, if you allow us to buy oil from you and pay in our Chinese currency, you can then take our Chinese currency to our gold market and turn it back in for gold. So they effectively back their currency through oil purchases and backed by both the oil and the gold. They did it in a very smart, strategic way. So if you show up to them and say, "Hey, I'll take your Chinese currency, I'll take that renminbi," and then I take that renminbi and go and sell it back to them for their gold. Now I've effectively, it took a couple of hops, but now they've effectively backed their currency by gold. Where are they getting the gold from? This is where it relates to this conversation. China has stopped exporting the gold that they mine on their own. They did that years ago. So you don't see a lot of gold come out of China. They were one of the top exporters at one point. They're now the top importer, one of the top importers of gold. So they don't export anything that they find within China, and they buy everyone else's gold. Where are they buying the gold from?
And they're going as far as they're funding a military port in West Africa. In Equatorial Guinea, they're literally building their first military base in Africa. So look at if you look so look at now. So they're in Sudan, they're in Central Africa, which is the Congo, now Equatorial Guinea. Like they're planting their flags all over Africa.
Mhm.
So, but to answer the question and to get to the last question, I do believe that Africa should solve Africa's problem. The problem that's been going on with them for a very long time and what's been handicapping them is the fact that they haven't gotten to the point of manufacturing their own products and military products specifically, the guns and the weapons that they need to defend themselves. and they've been doing this bartering system, and then the years and years and years of corrupt political leaders throughout the country will sell their own people out to make their own riches and behave like warlords and tyrants.
They don't make good deals.
They don't make good deals. They still
deals.
have very tribal ways of dealing with things, and that interferes with how they can unite this region, because it's a continent. It's not even just a country; it's a continent. So to get all these continents working in conjunction, the same way the Europeans do, which with negotiations and bartering, they put down the pistols more than like they used to, and start negotiating for resources and what have you. Africa just hasn't gotten there yet. They're still in this warlord sort of mindset.
I don't think any place else on the planet would let that happen either.
That part too.
Because Africa is the motherland.
Okay, so then you just answered my next question, Kristen. This last question for this section is, why can't Africa get it together?
No, I can't answer that question. I would like for them to get it together. I think that, okay, so I guess the answer would be because other folks, outsiders, would see the harm in that for them, for what their greed. It would interfere with their greed and their needs.
I think other countries and companies are making too much money from the war. I'm a big Star Trek guy. I think you guys know that. Just last night, I was watching an old Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode. The episode I was watching was when Quark, who's the bartender on Deep Space Nine, which is a space station, got into the weapons business, and they were selling weapons to both sides of the same conflict, right? And making tons of money by doing it. So war makes a lot of money for people. So that's a factor here as well. Why a lot of these weapons manufacturers are also there. You can fund both sides of the war, keep it going, and while these companies are making money from the weapon and ammunition sales, then you have these deals like Kristen just mentioned, where you have folks in Africa taking massive loans, and the collateral for those loans is the land. Right. So back to your point, Abdul, when it's blood in the streets by real estate, in this case, they're not outright buying it. They're saying, hey, we'll loan you this money, but if you default, give us the mineral rights to this, that, or the other. And there it is. They're almost certain to defect to renege on the loan. And next thing you know, the mineral rights are offered, they're given, they go in and they're getting all of these resources. So I think other players are making too much money and have too much access to allow the war itself to stop.
I'm with you. You said you're a Star Trek fan.
Big time.
I'm an Iceberg Slim fan, and ain't no pimp gonna let his bottom bitch go.
That's right.
Africa's been two-fisting these dicks for a very long time. I'm just taking 2 or 3 to the face. So the reason why they won't let them go, because Africa is the best bottom bitch that's ever been created.
You're so eloquent.
It started with the people. Then moved everything from minerals to chocolate to gold to oil, like everything that you can possibly
you name it.
You name it that you can take from a continent, they've taken it.
Yes. And continue.
Said gold, diamonds, oil.
Yeah. Greens, potatoes, tomatoes, lambs, rams. Yeah, they done took it all. And the people suffer in the process. And I think there's a correlation for why they won't let African Americans gain any power, because if we do, they know that we'll have this sort of Pan-African ideals to try to build up continent. So you got to step on them everywhere there is. Yeah. And if it's in the Caribbean, it's Caribbean. If it's in Africa, if it's in Haiti, if it's in the Americas, you got to squash off all the people so they can't unite, because if one uprises, the rest will help. And one of the main examples of that is South Africa. One of the major reasons why South Africa got their independence was because the African Americans in this country started to protest, and she was telling these corporations, Coca-Cola, what have you, to divest from South Africa. And they started to. Celebrities started making a point. In Europe, the Africans, African Europeans got to the celebrities, and Sun City, which was a major entertainment spot in South Africa is nothing because the entertainers wouldn't go there anymore.
Mhm.
So that's the power of the African American people to influence a whole country and people outside this country on how to respond when an uprising happens. But that's a
There's
conversation
also
for another time.
and I go back to fear again, right? There's always this underlying fear that we never talk about. That is, if all Black people around the world were to unite
What?
and to use the colonizers' playbook, it would be possible to do to others what was done to us culturally.
And
And
then
there's
some.
always and then some, and there's always that fear that that might happen. So that's sitting in the back of all this as well, unfortunately, you know.
Yeah, we are the global majority.
Mm-hmm.
We really are. Yeah, I don't use the word minority anymore.
No,
We
I
are the
don't either.
majority.
I don't
We are the
either.
majority.
I don't even believe, I know a lot of people are like, yeah, but statistics and numbers show and numbers say it. I'm like, well, who's giving us those numbers? I don't think we're the
Yeah.
minority in the US. I don't. I don't believe it. I see
And
sugar
and
where I go.
even with that, it's not just the numbers; it's the influence.
Oh yeah, well,
Just
yeah.
the
Here,
influence in culture, the
every,
influence
every,
in
every,
everything. Yeah.
every.
Christian, it's on you. False.
Breaking the wall of silence. The warnings come as a donor conference is being held in France on Monday, which French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné said was aimed at supporting mediation attempts, improving coordination across the international community, and providing support to Sudanese civilians. Speaking at a press conference in Paris alongside his German counterpart, Annalena Baerbock, he said, "We're here today to break this wall of silence around this conflict and mobilize all the international community. Today, we demonstrate that we will not forget the suffering of the people in Sudan," says Baerbock, adding that the humanitarian situation in the war-torn country is really disastrous. A CNN investigation found that almost 700 men and 65 children had been forcibly recruited by Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, over a 3-month period in Jazeera State alone. A lawyer with the African Center for Justice and Peace Studies, Mohammed Badawi, told CNN then that the RSF's coercive and violent tactics were to an enforced labor system, saying that people could be arrested if they didn't kill for the RSF. A lack of response. Doctors Without Borders on Friday called on leaders attending the Paris conference to immediately scale up the humanitarian response in Sudan. The charity claimed that a chronic lack of response for humanitarian organizations and the UN have made an already dire situation in Sudan desperate, as Sudanese authorities systematically block the delivery of aid to some areas, while the RSF have looted health facilities and supplies. Mohammed Usman, Sudan researcher at Human Rights Watch, also said that the global response to Sudan's brutal conflict needs to change. Usman urged leaders to hold those responsible for atrocities and violations of international humanitarian law to account. The warring parties in Sudan have inflicted tremendous suffering on Sudanese from all walks of life, he said. Leaders meeting in Paris should act to tackle the shamefully low levels of humanitarian funding, including for local responders, and commit to concrete measures against those deliberately hampering aid delivery to populations in need. A specific date for peace talks has not been decided yet, according to U.S. Special Envoy for Sudan, Tom Perriello. He said at a State Department briefing that Saudi Arabia was planning to host inclusive talks, and they hoped to announce a date soon. Previously, Perriello had indicated that talks might resume around mid-April after Ramadan, possibly on April 18th.
You know how much I don't trust the French. And this isn't just the French. This isn't the French bashing. But just think
Yes.
about this. Just think
No.
about this.
Yeah, no, totally no. Totally get it.
Africa has 54 countries in the continent of Africa. 29 of them speak French.
Including one that we came from, right? Morocco.
Morocco.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? Qu'est-ce que c'est?
So anytime the French start speaking about Africa or start speaking about darker colored nations, I always get skeptical because I know where their interests lie. And like a lot of other places, just think this, and I'll get to the questions in a second, but this might be venting. But if you look at most of these European nations, with the exception of America, Russia, and I might be missing a few others, from a resource standpoint, they don't provide a lot. I don't know the resource outside of culture that you get from France. I don't know the resources that outside of culture that you get from Italy or from Spain or Norway. You know what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. And then you turn that back around and say the same thing about Africa. And you can just start going, silver, gold, ivory, chocolate, all precious metals, oil. So anytime these countries start speaking about what's best for Africa, specifically the French, I really get skeptical. But anyway, that wasn't my question. That was just a vent.
But just to add on to your vent, and I think it's all other countries, right? I don't think it's any specific country that we need to name. There are so many layers of personal interest in this that anything that we hear, this is what's best for Africa, you have to always think about what are they getting out of the deal? What is it? What's happening in the background, right? What's underneath that? Why are they truly interested? Because there never seems to be a true humanitarian perspective. It's always, okay, we're going to play the humanitarian perspective because we're going to get X, Y, and Z as a result. There's always a transactional element when it relates to support for Africa in any way.
It's like Monsanto with their rice, how they want to give the rice away, but no one wants to take it because if you grow Monsanto rice, you can't grow anything else other than Monsanto rice on your fields. That seems like how we provide, and worse.
And worse, right? Because if you grow Monsanto rice on your field and your neighbor has non-Monsanto rice, but they find Monsanto rice in your neighbor's field, now you have a trademark, or I forget what it's called, issue.
Trademark infringement, Monsanto,
and they trademark infringement. And now Monsanto can go off your neighbor's field. So yes, just another topic for another day, but yes.
Monsanto rice? I know it's corn, but I didn't know they were rice too.
Oh no, they were rice because specifically they were trying to give it to Haiti, and Haiti wouldn't take it. After they had their earthquake a couple years ago, might have been how many years ago, but they were trying to give them their rice, and they were like, Haiti was like, hell no. And other places were like that too. They weren't the other one, but yeah, their rice is like that, and will kill everything else off, and you can only grow Monsanto rice and corn and wheat, and it goes on and on and on and on. So my first question to James, how do you define power?
It's a very difficult question. How do you define power? Power is where people perceive it to be. So there's different types of power. Of course, the ultimate power is the threat of death. And that's why we have police, right? That's why we have, that's why that exists. That's why police carry weapons. If you don't comply, at the end of the day, there's always the threat on your life. Power is in the threat of imprisonment, right? The threat of isolation. Power is in money, right? Being able to price someone out or take over for something because you can buy it out. Power can be influenced, right? The ability to get a group of people to follow you and decide they support what you're doing, right? There's different levels of power. So I don't think there's one. There probably is one really good definition. I don't know what that is, but power lies within the perception of the people who are viewing it.
Kristen, before you give your definition, Webster, or matter of fact, dictionary.com says, I'll give you two definitions.
No, do that after. No, let me give.
Okay, so
yeah, give your answer first, and then we get the definition. I like that. Yeah.
My definition of power is the source by which other things run from. Not run away, but run from.
Okay, that was it.
Yeah, see?
Okay,
What?
nothing.
Wait,
So,
wait, before you give the definition, what's your definition of power?
uh, I would go with the Black Panther's definition. It's something I'm paraphrasing, but power is the ability to have your enemy behave in a desired manner. There's a longer one, and I'll fill that out. But having whatever it is that you desire it to be, behave in a desired manner. If you can have power over a field, have it do what you want to do, grow crops, you have power over the field. If you can make a dog behave, you have power over the dog. You have the ability to make a thing behave in a desired manner.
So control.
There's an element of control in there, yes. There's an element of control in there. It's not all control. I would agree the majority of it, yes.
Yeah.
So yes, and I guess maybe the behavior plus the control. So you could be malevolent and have evil control, or you could be benevolent and have, you know, harmonious, good-willed control, I guess. But I guess it's control nonetheless. But also, I think
Thing you do.
I do because my other part of that is power is only as good as your ability to defend it. So maybe I put those definitions together. It's to have a thing have to make a thing behave in a desired manner and the ability to defend it. But I think power is only as good as your ability to defend that power. If you control a bunch of people, but you can't defend that people, then your power is no good. So
I don't know. It's interesting. Okay, but read the definition.
I'll read definition, then you can follow up.
Yeah.
One, ability to do or act, capability of doing or accomplishing something. So that goes with my definition, ability to have something act in a desired manner. Ability to do or act, capability of doing or accomplishing something. Second definition is political or national strength. So those are two definitions. The third is the possession or control or command over people. So,
And that third definition really gets to the heart, part of the heart of the problem here, in terms of what's happening. You had an authoritarian regime that was in place, and they got in place, back in 1989 by a military coup, right? So then, Al Bashir, right? Al Bashir was in charge. So from 89 until what, 20, I forget what year, 2019, he's in charge, right? And he's got power, right? He's got control over people. He can silence protesters. He can silence freedom of speech. He can, with an authoritarian rule, make people do what he wanted to have done. And people got tired of it. He enriched his friends. He squashed his enemies, and the people suffered. And so the people rose up. There was another military coup. They got Al Bashir out of there. And now what was left was a power vacuum, right? There was no one in power. So now you have the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF, who says, well, we've been defending this country all this time. We're in power. And then you have the Rapid Support Force, who was a paramilitary force that rise up and goes, well, we don't want you here because you were part of that regime with al-Bashir. We should be in power, right?
mm-hmm.
And here you are. And this is the situation that we
then
find ourselves in.
Yep.
So there's a lot of reasons why hostilities have really increased since April of 2023 between these two parties, right? These two armies, basically. But the number one reason is who should be in control, who should be in power. And again, the people suffer.
And that whole area, Eritrea, Ethiopia, over the last I don't know how many, like 30, 40 years, all the conflict has happened over the power dynamics, who should take over, who should be in control of what have you. Um, and I do personally think, this is just my own personal thought, has nothing to do with the Ignorance Contagious podcast or the other two people on it.
You
I
are
do.
Ignorance is Contagious podcast. What are you
I
talking
said,
about?
I said the other
This
two.
whole thing is you.
I think
he's
that
about to say something truly controversial. He's protecting us from it.
yes, I think that every conflict that happens over there is a white hand manipulating stuff. It's the
Okay.
Italians in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
It's the French and what have you in Sudan, in Morocco, and that whole area, Africa just in general. If you dig deep enough, you'll find a white hand pulling the puppet strings.
I don't think you need to dig.
and funding these things, but they make them seem like it's black on black adversaries against one another when it's really just other interests. Like we'll keep saying, these proxies that go in there, specifically the Sudan, as we talk about now. And I wouldn't just say white, because there's some brown hands in there too. Yemen has a lot to do with what's going on in Sudan. The Middle East has a lot to do with what's going on in Sudan, because they're an oil power and they want to control certain oil powers. And who gets a chance? Russia's the same thing. They're an oil power, or they have oil, and it's the control over the resources of that section. So a lot of times, with regards to Africa, it's never really Africans fighting over Africa with stuff over Africa. With the few example, I think Rwanda might have been, and even then there might have been some nefarious thing going on behind the scenes. But
Crazy.
anyway.
So much craziness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd add one other point, because there's so many layers to all of this. And again, I tend to see things in a very holistic way. I think at the end of the day, the biggest issue across all the issues is we continue to see ourselves as separate from one another. We do not see ourselves as part of one body, one mind, one spirit, one energy. And because of that, because we see differences between ourselves, we see friends and we see enemies. And I think that's the catalyst for a lot of what we're talking about here, and a lot of other things that we're not talking about.
I'm so sure we are one body.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Since you individually gave me your definition of power, using the definition that you just gave me on your own, name me a time where you had a power dynamic that you had to fight against. Either one can go first, Kristen or James. Just based on your definition of what you just gave as power.
I'll give one. And this is in the business sense. I was going into a meeting, and I knew that a person who was several levels higher than me was going to go in and try to blame me for something that she created through her decisions, right? She had the ear of all of these other executives. I did not at the time, right? All I had was the truth. But she made it clear, when we go into this meeting, she's going to hang this around my neck. So I walked into the meeting with all the emails, kind of organized, all the decisions that were made. I kind of knew where she was going to go with it. And the way I had to approach it, I could not attack her, because then it would look like I had a personal vendetta. I knew it would have to be, she's going to raise something, blame me for it. I'm going to have to ask questions so she can dig her own hole. And then I present the evidence of the truth of what really happened. So I walked into this situation with no power. She walked in with all of the political power, the power of the authority of her title, the power of her tenure, and the power of all the relationships. And I didn't. So we start off the meeting. I'm presenting. She stops me, says, "Well, you did this thing." I said, "Really? In what way did I do this?" "Well, you're the project manager. You're the blah, blah, blah. You did this." And then, of course, I had to let her dig her own hole. So are you suggesting that whoever it was who made the decision on this is the person that's really responsible for what happened here? Yes, absolutely. You made the decision, so you're responsible. Well, and then I reach into my folder. Actually, it's interesting. You made the decision. Here's the email where you sent it out saying that you made this decision, and I passed it around the table, right? So then the meeting continues, and then she tries another one, right? And she goes, "Well, blah blah blah," and I forget what it was. And then I said, "Well, interesting. Are you suggesting then that because of blah 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 blah?" And she goes, "Absolutely, and you're in charge and you own it." well, interesting. And I go reach into my folder. Here's the email where you said, blah, blah, you made that decision. I pass it around the table, right? And
Damn.
again, she gets, and it got really cool because on the third one, she's like, well, you did this, this, and other. All I had to do at that point was pat the folder, and the whole room erupted in laughter. And that's when I knew the power dynamic had shifted. So now, while she walked in with the power of her tenure, her title, the relationships, all those things, now I had the power of proof on my side. So again, from my definition, power is where the perception perceives it. We walked in, the power was perceived to be in one place. I was able to successfully shift the perception of that power to a different place, and it worked. I made that meeting. It absolutely accelerated my career.
Ladies and
because
gentlemen, Gangsta LeGrand.
Gangsta LeGrand, yeah.
because here's the other thing about power too, right? Because of the way I handled that, no one else since then, till this day, has tried to step to me in that way.
They know.
I call it the back pocket. I keep all this evidence in my back pocket just in case, which kind of goes to your point, Abdul, about power needing to be defended.
Defended,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
What I was able to successfully defend myself. And whenever I'm going into a situation that could be a little bit volatile, I walk in ready to do that. I hope I don't have to, because I want to maintain those relationships. I burned that relationship with her, or should I say she burned it with me, because she was going to attack me. And I defended myself in such a way that her missiles hit her property instead of me, right? So so I think being able to defend yourself is a part of power as we're talking about it. Of course, I believe in powers that are significantly higher than what we're talking about as well. But that's a story for another day.
Mm-hmm. Kristen, same question. Name me a time that you had to fight against a power dynamic.
I can't think of a time, honestly. I'm sure it existed, but no, I couldn't. I would have needed to have given that some thought in advance. Honestly, can't think of it. You?
I think that every time I walk outside, I think there's micro power dynamics and there's macro power dynamics. And based on my definition, the ability to have control something, have it act in a desired manner, and be able to defend it. Anytime you walk outside, I can remember from the age where I can cognitively remember first grade. They wanted you to behave in a certain way, which is always the European way. They wanted you to look a certain way, which is always the European way. They want you to speak in a certain way, and to have to fight against those particular dynamics and be able to defend yourself. Remember, Black man, I'm a Muslim, I'm from North Jersey, so you take on
Your
all
name
these
is
little.
Abdul Wahid.
My name is Abdul Wahid. My mother's half Chinese and Pan, she's half Chinese and Panamanian. Like all these cultural things that I was brought up with, coming to the gate into an American institution, are now trying to be slowly chipped away at.
And then add that sassiness. Oh my goodness.
Then add that to it.
Oh, sassy Abdul, add that. Oh Lord.
So I think every time I step out the door, these you have these little constant power struggles with other people, how they want you to speak, how they want you to dress, pull your pants up. So based on my definition, I'm basing that on my definition.
Right. But is it it's your definition is perceived. So then you have the ability to alter that, don't you?
The majority culture is always trying to change. The ones who are in power, whether you call the majority or not, the ones who are in power are always trying to change the relationship between the ones who are in power and the ones who are under their boot. And those little power dynamic struggles happen every day. They're trying to turn people into clones, to make everybody look away, act away, listen to the same stuff, eat the same stuff. There's these, in my opinion, there's these forces. And like James said, something else and some in human form that are trying to have you behave in a desired manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you have to defend yourself against that. And if you're not cognitive of that, I was known that as a child because I didn't speak the language coming here. I'm American, born abroad. So I am an American citizen by birth. I just happen to be born in another country.
Make sure they all hear that.
Yeah, man, I make sure they all hear that.
Well, they come for you.
But the fact that I lived in another country, I had to speak another language. And then coming here, you change that. They told my parents from a child, don't speak anything to them but English. And then all the other cultural dynamics come into play after a while. And when you get into high school, it gets even worse because now you're really sort of cognitive of what's going on around you, who your friends are, the clothes that you wear, the fact that they don't want you to believe certain things. Even in the 90s, oh, racism isn't a thing. It's over. We all like chicken. We all like the same music. We all like, it's always this embracing of, they always want to embrace, but have their culture dominate the embrace.
Right.
It's
Be
never,
like,
hey, we're, huh?
Be like, but not be.
Yes. Oh, we're all one. We're all one people. By the way, we can only speak this. Oh yeah, we're all one people. By the way, we can only dress like this. So those little micro power dynamics, I think, is something that I've been aware of for a very long time. And those have been my fights against the power system.
Mm.
So these will be my last two questions. And then we can go on to the lesson. Who really gains in a power struggle?
May I?
Go for it.
So now I'm going to go real deep. So there's a term called the Hegelian dialectic. The Hegelian dialectic, and our listeners can look it up. It basically says that you create a situation where two forces oppose each other, but who really benefits is the one force sitting above that's kind of pulling the strings. So we're looking at, in the case of Sudan, we're looking at two factions fighting each other, right? The SAF, the RSF, they're fighting each other. But who's benefiting above that? Who is really truly benefiting? So I tend to look at situations through that Hegelian dialectic. It's really helped me to really find the true causes of certain conflicts. Sometimes what you hear as the cause of a conflict turns out not to be the cause at all, right? It turns out to be something deeper, something more singular, and something usually more sinister. But what you'll hear is, oh, here's why these two factions are fighting each other, and it'll make sense, right? They're fighting each other over land, over philosophical differences, over religion, over blah blah blah. But usually, if you really look at it, if you really commit to this, if you really commit to the idea of the Hegelian dialectic, you will find that there's one group, one source, one person in some cases that's truly benefiting from the conflict that's happening underneath them. And you'll never know. They'll never admit it. They'll never say that they're there. You may not even know that they're there, but they're there.
Yeah, they sort of give the statement, then they give the rebuttal, then they give the answer. In the Hegelian dialectic, it's called thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Correct.
So they'll show the problem, and then they'll prop up the people who'll be against the problem, and then they'll come back after these two factions are warring and give the solution, which is what they wanted anyway.
That's right.
So
it's part of the reason, and I hate to say it this way, it's part of the reason why we only have two political systems. Two political parties in the United States.
We have one political parties on different sides of the coin.
Correct.
One clown posse.
Yeah.
Correct.
We have the Crips and the Bloods, and they're both gang members. So
and who's truly benefiting from those activities?
Yeah, who benefits from it?
Yeah. I'll leave it at that. I'll dot on that. Right.
Same question, Kristen. Who really gains from a power struggle?
I think the one who gains is the one who got out of the struggle what he went in to obtain. The winner is.
Okay. Are those the factions that are fighting?
I mean, across the board. If I got in the ring to knock you out and I knocked you out, I won.
I would agree with that. But then a step further than that, it's like, yeah, the two boxers are fighting.
You're not going over step. Stop it.
No, I'm saying with mine, I agree with that. But while the fighters are fighting and one knocks the other one out, the one who makes the most of the money is the promoter. And he really gains from that struggle. So the two people might be fighting, and one might have gotten what he wanted out of it, but who really wins is the promoter, because it didn't matter who won that fight. The promoter was getting paid.
So if that's what the promoter was a part of that for, and he got what he went in there for,
No, but
Whoever's
you said
whoever
knocking niggas out. So I don't know what
I
you're
gave that as an
talking
example. I gave that as an example because you're pulling other outsiders. I'm looking at it as just right
No,
here
you're
in
not. No, you're not.
go ahead now.
Two plus two is 10. 2 plus 2 is 10. So I think the one who in my interpretation, the one who wins is the one who caused it.
The
Because in
one
the
who
end,
the one who caused it?
the one who wins is the one who caused it. Because I'm thinking the macro. I'm thinking the people. You have generals and you have soldiers. The one who causes the struggles are never the soldiers. I mean, never the generals. They're the soldiers. They're the pawns. It's the chessboard. The rooks and the bishops and the knights. They're all. It doesn't matter. They can all die as long as the king and the queen win.
Do they
The
benefit? The ones
the
who
ones who caused it. Yeah.
benefit?
Power struggles, in
I
my
seen a lot
opinion.
of I seen a lot of Karens on IG get knocked out. They done caused a lot of stuff and they did not win. Now you got some explaining to do, Lucy. I don't get that.
Okay, well then, so I'm speaking. I understand what you're doing. I'm speaking the macro. So let's go when you're carrying. Let's go with your Karen
One
situation.
who caused it. The one who caused it
So
is the
you see a lot of Karens getting knocked out on IG, and the Karens lose, right? So let's
right.
go. Let's stick with that idea. But then again, the platforms who hold the video make a bunch of money. The corporations who then benefit that make even more money. So
Okay, you keep
Karens in the immediate.
going out.
That's why I said in my I'm talking about my
And there's
definition.
that sass. There's that sass right there. There's that sass. You put
I'm
it down.
speaking. I'm
Put that
speaking the
down there, young
macro,
lady. You watch your
and in
tone,
the
young lady.
and in the macro, yes, it might have seemed like the Karens caused the issue, but the Karens were just a side effect of these other things, putting a battery in your back to have them behave a certain way, to then get
So,
capitalized off of behaving a certain way.
okay,
It's like the
so
KKK. It's like, let me finish. It's like the KKK. The KKK is empowered because you have all these ancillary forces putting batteries in their back, having them do certain things. And then when they do those certain things, all the people who are putting batteries in their back benefit from it. So even though they might have immediately lost the fight in front of you, the bigger macro part of it is that they really won because they caused dissension. They made a bunch of money off of it. And that was the intended goal by the ones who started the problem.
I understand that, but in the Karen example, IG is not setting them up. IG is just jumping on board and exploiting it, so to speak. They're not necessarily the cause of it.
I don't know if that's completely true. Because what IG does and what social media does, it fans the flames.
Exploits it, yeah. But
Exploits,
I mean,
but no, it does not exploit it. It fans the flames. So one Karen will spawn 10 Karens.
so this is a perfect example of you're fighting somebody. I come along and go, "Ooh, I'm fanning the flame," but I didn't cause that. I didn't cause you to get your ass whooped in public on Main Street on a Saturday afternoon. Everybody crowded around.
Uh,
You was talking shit.
I don't
I just
know. I
matched
think no. I think any instigator owns some of it. So you might not have made the two be at odds, but you might have heightened the situation to make them want to fight.
I benefit.
Which means you caused some of it. So yeah, you did cause it. But
I benefit.
did you benefit? You were entertained.
Said I caused it. You said I'm a part of the cause of it.
Yeah.
You said the one who caused it benefits from it.
The one who caught
I tell you
societally, I
what.
would agree.
Tell you what.
Society, I would agree.
You go back in the lab and you rethink this.
No, I'm my
You get
idea
back to us
sound.
next.
My idea
Podcast.
sound. You bringing instigation and you said your first
You went back to back.
analogy was the fact that I saw this on and the Karen get knocked out. Anyway, I'm gonna leave that alone. So the next part of it, because we're gonna go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
My last question: does absolute power corrupt absolutely?
Absolutely.
Kristen, if you first.
Right. Get the cat out the way before the machine gun.
Get the Karen and Karen, I was watching and I clapped and I said, ooh, and
repeat that question for me, please.
does absolute power corrupt absolutely? That's a quote from Lord Acton, by the way.
Lord Atkins, does absolute power corrupt?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm gonna say could be not. I don't know. Let's let James take it away.
So does absolute power corrupt absolutely? I would say usually. I wouldn't say always, and I won't say absolutely, which I was jokingly saying before. I think usually it does. And when we look at the situation in Sudan, we see it. We just continue to see over the generations, someone coming in, authoritative power, right? They're going to control everything. They're going to enrich themselves and their friends, and they're going to disenfranchise the majority of the people. It's a situation where you have very few people benefiting, and the majority of people, unfortunately losing or competing for the scraps afterwards. So, in those situations, typically, usually, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I don't think it's 100% though. I think there are people that are capable of the type of humility and servant-based leadership that would not be corrupted. They could actually be in a situation where they could lead with absolute power and not use it. There is it's an amazing concept to think about that you could have all the power in the world and then choose not to use it and allow things to just go their own way. It takes a very rare person, rare as in maybe one every few millennia, it could be, right? But is it possible? Yes. So that's why I'll say my answer is usually absolute power corrupts absolutely. I want to leave a little space for the very few that could prove that rule as an exception.
So I'm going to attach this or approach it from a philosophical standpoint. And I would say yes, if we're dealing with the human condition. Because even the idea of someone having absolute power is corrupting in itself. The fact that you have total control of everything, the idea, just the fact that you can do that is a corrupting influence on the human mind to be able to know the knowledge of the fact that if I wave a pinky finger, I could do whatever I choose to. That is very corrupting. I do believe in, spiritual things and a God who's all, omniscient and omnipresent, what have you. But I'm talking just specifically human beings. I do believe the idea of an absolute ruler controlling everything from a human being standpoint is very corrupting. And I don't know anyone or anything that has any human being that's taken that and not have corrupted it or use it in the corrupting way.
Jesus? Did he use it in a corruptive way? Or should I say, did that book get written?
So when I say human beings,
That
I
book
say
got put away.
no. So if we're
He's
going down that
here.
road, I look at religious people in the books. Any book you look at, the Torah, the Quran, I look at them as been divinely influenced. So they didn't have the power. The one who gave them the information had the power, which was God. So that's a different conversation.
Good answer. Good answer. I
So,
get it. I get it.
So Jesus didn't have, I just for people who are listening, you understand that Jesus didn't have the power. God had the power, and He bestowed it on Jesus and allowed him because if you look at any of the biblical books, anytime they needed something done, they prayed. Moses prayed to have the sea parted. Jesus prayed when he was on the cross. Right. Like you just go down the lineage. Lot prayed, Moses prayed, Noah prayed.
Because technically that applies to all of us. We are not that power. We all rely on a source for that power. If that's what, we believe.
Most people don't believe that to be true.
All right. Well, yeah, that's a whole nother.
And that's a whole nother conversation. So that's my definition.
I got the power.
Yeah. You and Snap. Yeah. I say you and Snap. So we'll go on to the lesson. Let's get it out the way early. Kristen.
Yes. You guys, James LeGrand was just gangster LeGrand was just getting down. It was. Yes, it was.
What did you learn from today's episode?
I learned that it just keeps going on and on. That they just keep doing black folks dirty all over the world. That's it.
I gave you time to expound. Okay.
Listen,
Like I said,
sometimes everything doesn't need to just be on and on and on till the break of dawn. Sometimes things are just, that's it. You know, sometimes that's just it. That's all you need. That's it.
I agree.
Thank you.
James, same question. What did you learn from this episode?
I think three things I would go with. One is that people are truly resilient. I think about, we talked about the fact that in Sudan, 16,000 casualties, 8.5 million people displaced. We look at Russia and Ukraine, just all the people that are figuring out how to survive and keep going. There's something enduring about the human spirit and all these different conflicts that should never be ignored. We just have this power to dig deep and figure out how to figure out. So there's a resilience that is just incredible. And the people who are living through these situations, these terrible, horrific situations, day in and day out, my hat's off to them. I mean, it's just terrible what they have to go through. But to be that resilient and adaptable, just amazing, just amazing. The second thing is, just thinking about the concentration of power into too few hands, and what that looks like, and we see it over and over again in these authoritarian regimes. Again, the United States system of democracy is not perfect, not by any means, right? Got lots of issues with it, but there's lots of checks and balances there, right? We don't concentrate power to any one person or group. We make sure that power gets shared and there's checks and balances against each other. And we continue to test that, right? We continue to test, is that good enough, right? Because I'll leave it at that. So I think power concentrated in too few hands is a recipe for disaster. Got to be careful there. The third thing I would mention is we need more empathy and leadership. We need people to really see themselves in other people. Again, I do see that as the overriding issue with humanity overall. We continue to see the divisions, we see the separations, we see the differences. But if we could really focus on seeing ourselves as the same and seeing the similarities, man, everything would be different. You would see that someone else's hunger is your hunger. You would see that someone else's torment is your torment. Excuse me. And we could learn to try to close that out, to fix it, to find solutions. But we don't. Instead, we look for how do we benefit from it. So this person is creating torment for that person. How can I benefit? Right. And those are the layers in the conversation that we just had about, Sudan in general and Africa overall. There's power players in there. There's, this versus that. And then there's someone benefiting, or multiple groups and people benefiting on top. We need to get back to seeing ourselves as other people, putting ourselves in other people's shoes and seeing the oneness that we have.
I would say the lesson I learned in this episode, going back to something Kristen brought up earlier, so we'll go back to a biblical definition. 1 Timothy 6:10, for the love of money is the root of all evil. And if you substitute money for power, because I think in certain instances they're synonyms, money and power, ownership of resource, power, for the love of that, in fact, the idea that you want to covet that thing is where human beings fail. The power dynamics, the love of just those particular things. So the thing that I learned about the Sudanese war, you could take out the Sudanese people and place that same thing in Gaza and Palestine, and it's the same struggle. You take that same dynamic, then you put it in Ukraine and Russia, it's the same dynamic. You put that same thing in South Central California with the Crips and the Bloods, same dynamic. It's the control of resources, it's control of power. And to echo what James said, if we really understood that we were just one united people trying to live in existence on this earth, the best way we can, we'd be better off. But these ideas and these philosophies, some of which have been put onto us by groups of people who are the ones want us to believe these certain things, have us believing that we're not. These ideas about color and race and gender and money and those things are the strings that the puppet masters use to control us, which then gives them the power in the end. With that being said, this has been Ignorance is Contagious podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe on all social media platforms. And until next time, Kristen.
Thank you, everybody.
The Rock is in the building. Facto.